Jasmine Reynolds stood in the boardroom of National Airways, her posture impeccable, as she announced the withdrawal of her company's $4.9 billion investment. The airline executive's faces drained of color as recognition dawned. She was the same woman their security had forcibly removed from first class 3 weeks ago. Today, she declared, "I'll show you exactly what discrimination costs." Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about powerful comebacks against discrimination. Now let's see how Jasmine Reynolds turned the tables on an entire airline. Jasmine Reynolds, 42, was the embodiment of success. As CEO of Tech Fusion Enterprises, a revolutionary tech company she built from the ground up, now valued at $17 billion. She had broken numerous barriers in Silicon Valley. Her company specialized in AI integration solutions that had transformed everything from healthcare to transportation. Jasmine had learned to navigate the corporate world as a Black woman facing and overcoming obstacles that would have crushed others. On that fateful Tuesday morning, she arrived at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport 3 hours before her scheduled departure to New York. She was heading to meet with a group of potential international investors, a deal that could expand Tech Fusion's global reach significantly. The presentation she had prepared over the past month was loaded on her laptop, and she planned to review it one last time during the flight. National Airways was known as a premier carrier, which is why Jasmine had chosen them for her business travel for the past 5 years. She had top-tier status with the airline and always flew first class, finding the quiet environment conducive to preparation and the occasional necessary nap. Today was no different, as she checked in at the priority counter, where the attendant barely looked up as he processed her boarding pass. "Gate A23, Miss Reynolds. Boarding begins in 1 hour," he said, flatly sliding her documents across the counter. Jasmine nodded and proceeded through security, her rolling briefcase and designer handbag containing everything she needed. She wore a tailored navy suit, her natural hair styled in a sophisticated twist, and minimal jewelry, her usual professional appearance that had graced the covers of Forbes and Black Enterprise alike. After a quick coffee in the lounge, she headed to the gate, taking her place in the priority boarding line. When her zone was called, she walked confidently down the jet bridge and onto the aircraft, where a flight attendant named Megan Walsh glanced at her boarding pass. "First class is to your right," Megan said, her smile noticeably tighter than the one Jasmine had observed her giving to the white male passenger ahead of her. Jasmine found her window seat 3A and settled in. She had just placed her briefcase in the overhead bin when a white businessman in his 50s, Harold Cooper, arrived to claim the aisle seat beside her. Immediately, his body language shifted a subtle tensing, a sidelong glance that Jasmine had experienced countless times throughout her career. "Excuse me," he said stiffly, avoiding eye contact as he sat down and immediately spread his newspaper into a portion of her space. Jasmine shifted slightly toward the window, giving him a brief professional smile before turning her attention to her phone. She sent a few last emails before the required airplane mode would cut her communication. When Megan came by with pre-departure drinks, she offered Harold a warm smile. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you today? Champagne, perhaps? Or orange juice?" "Scotch neat," Harold replied, receiving an immediate, "Coming right up." When Megan's eyes finally moved to Jasmine, the warmth vanished. Anything she asked curtly. "Water with lemon, please," Jasmine replied politely. "We'll see if we have lemon," Megan responded before walking away. When she returned with the drinks, Harold's scotch came with a small dish of premium nuts he hadn't requested. Jasmine's water came without lemon. As the cabin prepared for departure, Jasmine tried to place her briefcase under the seat, but found it difficult to maneuver in the limited space. She looked up, hoping to catch Megan's attention for assistance, but the flight attendant walked past her multiple times, helping other passengers with similar requests. Meanwhile, Harold had summoned Megan 3 times, once for a blanket, once to take his jacket, and once more for another scotch. Each request met with immediate cheerful service. While waiting for takeoff, Jasmine overheard a whispered conversation between Megan and another flight attendant, Kelly, who had glanced in her direction. Keeping an eye on her, Megan murmured, "Making sure she's not in the wrong seat." Kelly nodded. They always try to sneak up front. Jasmine pretended to be absorbed in her phone, her stomach tightening with the familiar knot of being otherized, despite her status, achievements, and rightful place in the cabin. She'd experienced this countless times at executive meetings, upscale stores, 5-star hotels, and apparently still on flights where she was a frequent premium passenger. Just before the captain announced final preparations for takeoff, Megan approached Jasmine again, this time with an unmistakable edge to her voice. "May I see your boarding pass again?" she demanded, despite having checked it upon entry. Jasmine reached into her handbag and produced the document without comment, maintaining her composure. Megan scrutinized it longer than necessary, her expression suggesting disappointment at finding no discrepancy. "Thank you," she said, finally returning the boarding pass before walking away without another word. The plane began to taxi, and Jasmine took a deep breath. She had a presentation to review and a major deal to close. She wouldn't let these small indignities derail her focus. As the aircraft accelerated down the runway, she had no idea that this routine flight was about to become a turning point, not just in her life, but in corporate America's approach to discrimination. Once the seatbelt sign turned off, Jasmine opened her laptop to review her presentation. She pulled up the slides detailing TechFusion's revolutionary new security protocol that would change how financial institutions protected customer data. The deal in New York could be worth billions if she nailed the pitch. Harold, having finished his second scotch, began spreading out even more, his elbow repeatedly nudging into her space. Each time, Jasmine shifted slightly toward the window, trying to maintain professional courtesy. When his knee deliberately pressed against hers under the shared armrest, she finally spoke up. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely. "Would you mind giving me a bit more space? I'm trying to prepare for an important meeting." Harold glanced at her screen, then gave a smirk. "Diversity hire, huh? What company lets the help make these kinds of presentations?" Jasmine stiffened but kept her voice even. "I'm the CEO and founder of TechFusion. This is my presentation because it's my company." Harold snorted. "Right. And I'm Warren Buffett." Rather than engage further, Jasmine inserted her earbuds and tried to focus on her work. She'd faced men like Harold throughout her career, men who couldn't conceive of a black woman holding power in spaces they considered their birthright. 30 minutes into the flight, Megan served drinks and snacks. Again, Harold received attentive service, while Jasmine's request for coffee was met with a curt "we'll get to you eventually." When the coffee finally came, it was lukewarm, and without the cream she'd requested. As Jasmine continued working, Harold's voice grew progressively louder as he conducted a business call despite the aircraft rules against it. He spoke over her head to another white passenger across the aisle about the problems with these diversity programs and how standards had fallen. Just as Jasmine was reviewing her financial projections, Harold reached for his drink and accidentally knocked it over. The liquid splashed directly onto her keyboard, causing her laptop to flicker. "Oh, clumsy me," he said with transparent insincerity. "These seats are just so cramped, aren't they? Not enough room for everyone." Jasmine grabbed napkins quickly, trying to save her computer and the work it contained. "This presentation is critical," she said, unable to completely mask her frustration. "Please, be more careful." Harold's face hardened. "Don't use that tone with me. It was an accident." As Jasmine dabbed at her computer trying to assess the damage, Harold pressed the call button. Within seconds, Megan appeared. "Is there a problem, sir?" she asked, completely ignoring Jasmine and the obvious spill. "This woman is being aggressive after I had a minor accident," Harold complained, his voice carrying to nearby passengers. "I don't feel comfortable." Megan immediately turned to Jasmine with a stern expression. "Ma'am, we need everyone to remain civil on this flight." "He deliberately spilled his drink on my laptop," Jasmine explained, gesturing to the obvious evidence. "I have an important presentation in New York, and now my equipment is damaged." "I'm sure. It was just an accident," Megan dismissed. "Perhaps you should be more understanding." A few moments later, a security officer named Richard Bennett appeared. He was a tall, imposing man with a crew cut and a scowl etched into his features. Megan immediately pulled him aside and whispered something, occasionally glancing back at Jasmine. Officer Bennett approached, standing directly in the aisle next to Harold's seat. "What seems to be the issue here?" Before Jasmine could speak, Harold jumped in. "This woman is being belligerent after a simple accident. I'm just trying to enjoy my flight in peace." Bennett turned to Jasmine, his expression already decided. "Ma'am, we can't have disturbances in the first-class cabin. I'm going to need you to calm down." "I am perfectly calm," Jasmine replied evenly. "This man has been making racist comments, deliberately invaded my space, and damaged my property. I'm simply trying to work." Around them, passengers had begun to take notice. A few had their phones out, recording discreetly. One young woman in the row behind looked concerned, but remained silent. An older black man across the aisle watched with a resigned expression. Jasmine recognized the look of someone who had seen this story play out too many times before. "Ma'am, I don't see any damage," Bennett said, though he made no effort to actually look at her laptop. "What I do see is you disrupting the peace in this cabin. If you can't behave appropriately in first class, perhaps you should move to economy where you belong." The implication was unmistakable, and a flush of anger and humiliation washed over Jasmine's face. "I paid for this seat just like everyone else. I have every right to be here." Bennett leaned closer, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. "Rights can be revoked when you cause problems. Now, are you going to cooperate, or do we need to take further action?" Jasmine sat up straighter, squaring her shoulders. "I've done nothing wrong. I will not be moved from the seat I purchased because of this man's behavior." Bennett's face hardened as he reached forward, wrapping his fingers around Jasmine's arm, the first physical contact that crossed a critical line. "Take your hand off me," Jasmine said firmly, her voice not raised but carrying the unmistakable authority that had helped her navigate boardrooms for years. "You have no right to touch me." But Officer Bennett's grip only tightened his expression, communicating that this situation had just escalated beyond the point of reasonable resolution. "Stand up, ma'am Bennett," commanded, his fingers digging into Jasmine's arm. "You're coming with me." "I most certainly am not," Jasmine responded, her voice controlled, despite the adrenaline now coursing through her veins. "Take your hands off me immediately." Instead of complying, Bennett reached for his radio with his free hand. "I need backup in first-class seat 3A. Uncooperative passenger." Jasmine looked around the cabin, making deliberate eye contact with those recording the incident. "I want everyone to witness that I have done nothing wrong. This man spilled his drink on my laptop, has been making racist comments, and now I'm being physically assaulted by airline security." A murmur ran through the cabin. One brave passenger, a middle-aged white woman in 2C, spoke up. "She's right. I've been watching the whole time. She didn't do anything." Bennett shot the woman a warning look. "Ma'am, please don't interfere with security operations." Within minutes, 2 additional security officers, both white men in their 30s, arrived in the cabin, creating a wall of authority surrounding Jasmine's seat. Passengers watched with a mix of discomfort, shock, and, for a disturbing number, apparent satisfaction. "Last chance to come quietly," Bennett warned. Jasmine reached into her handbag, causing all 3 officers to tense. but she simply pulled out her business card and ID. "My name is Jasmine Reynolds. I'm the CEO of Tech Fusion Enterprises. I'm traveling to New York for a business meeting that will affect thousands of jobs. There is absolutely no reason for this treatment." The youngest officer glanced at her credentials, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, but Bennett snatched the card away. "Anyone can get fake business cards printed," he scoffed, handing it back without really examining it. "A real CEO would know how to behave in public." "Google me," Jasmine challenged. "Right now, I built a $17 billion company from the ground up." "We're not here to play games," Bennett replied. "Stand up now or we will physically remove you." Harold watched with a poorly concealed smirk as the confrontation unfolded beside him. Megan stood at the front of the cabin, arms crossed, expression vindicated. When Jasmine remained seated, Bennett nodded to his colleagues. What followed was a humiliating spectacle as the three men forcibly removed her from her seat. One grabbed her belongings from the overhead bin, carelessly shoving her laptop into her bag. Another took her by the arm, while Bennett pushed from behind. "I'm complying, stop pushing me," Jasmine said, trying to maintain some dignity as she was marched through first class. From her peripheral vision, she could see passengers' reactions, some averting their eyes, unwilling to witness the injustice, others recording, a few nodding in approval, and a small minority looking genuinely disturbed. "This is what happens when you don't know your place," one passenger muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Another whispered, "They should check if she really paid for that seat." But there were also voices of protest. The woman from 2C stood up. "This is wrong, she didn't do anything." A young black man further back called out, "I saw the whole thing. This is straight-up discrimination." Security quickly silenced them. "Anyone interfering will be removed as well," Bennett announced to the cabin. As they paraded Jasmine through business class and economy, the humiliation deepened. Hundreds of eyes followed her journey, most passengers assuming she must have done something terrible to warrant such treatment. A child pointed and asked his mother, "What did the lady do?" The long walk through the terminal was even worse. Regular travelers stopped to stare as the security officers flanked her like a criminal. Jasmine held her head high, but inside a storm was brewing a mixture of rage, humiliation, and an ice-cold determination that was crystallizing with each step. When they finally reached the main terminal, Bennett released her with a shove that was just gentle enough to avoid being an obvious assault. "You're banned from this flight," he informed her. National Airways reserves the right to refuse service to anyone causing disturbances. "I want your names and badge numbers," Jasmine demanded, pulling out her phone. "All of you." The officers exchanged glances before Bennett stepped forward. "You can file a complaint online like everyone else. Now move along before we have you escorted from the building entirely." With that, they turned and walked away, leaving Jasmine standing alone in the busy terminal, her carefully planned day in shambles. Her crucial meeting, now impossible to attend. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of what had just happened. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with a barely contained fury. Then, drawing on the same resilience that had carried her through countless boardrooms where she was the only black woman, she straightened her jacket, took a deep breath, and pulled out her phone. "Terrence," she said, when her executive assistant answered. "I need you to reschedule today's meeting and book me a hotel, then clear my calendar tomorrow. Something's happened, and we have work to do." As she ended the call, Jasmine looked back toward the gates, where flights continued to board without interruption, the machinery of air travel grinding on as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Something that would have consequences far beyond what National Airways could possibly imagine. Jasmine sat in a private lounge she'd accessed through her executive travel membership, a glass of untouched water on the table before her. Her reflection in the window showed a woman composed on the surface, but her eyes betrayed the tempest within. The humiliation of being marched through the plane like a criminal still burned fresh. Her phone rang. Terrence Williams, her executive assistant of 5 years, calling back for details. "Jasmine, what happened?" "I've rescheduled the investor meeting for next week." But they weren't happy about it. She recounted the events in precise detail, her voice steady but tight. They did what Terrence's outrage exploded through the speaker. "That's blatant discrimination. We need to call the media right now." CNN would run this story tonight. Black female CEO dragged off a plane for existing while successful. "No," Jasmine replied firmly. "Not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" "Those racists need to be exposed immediately." "Terrence, I've navigated these waters my entire career. Reactive outrage gives them control of the narrative. We'll respond, but strategically." She paused. "Call Diana." "I want legal counsel on this immediately." Within 30 minutes, Diana Foster, TechFusion's chief legal counsel, joined the call. Diana had been with Jasmine since the early days, a brilliant Harvard law graduate who had turned down multiple offers from prestigious firms to help build TechFusion. "This is textbook discrimination," Diana stated after hearing the full account. "We have multiple grounds for legal action: discrimination, assault, defamation, breach of contract." "Do you have the names of everyone involved?" "Only partial information," Jasmine admitted. "But there were numerous witnesses, and I'm certain people were recording." "We should issue a statement immediately," Diana suggested. "Get ahead of this before they spin it." Jasmine leaned back in her chair, memories flooding back. The venture capitalist who'd asked if she was the assistant during her first funding pitch. The executive who'd mistaken her for waitstaff at a gala honoring her own innovations. The countless times she'd been asked to prove her credentials in spaces where her white counterparts were presumed competent. "This isn't my first experience with discrimination," Jasmine said quietly, "but it will be the last I allow to happen without consequences." Her phone pinged with an email notification from National Airways, a generic apology claiming they were investigating the incident and offering 1,000 bonus miles as a goodwill gesture. 10,000 miles, Jasmine said with a hollow laugh. "Apparently that's the price of my dignity." While Diana outlined potential legal approaches, Jasmine opened her laptop, thankfully still functional despite the spilled drink, and began researching. Not about discrimination cases or public relations strategies, but about National Airways itself, their corporate structure, their leadership, their financial standing. An hour into her research, she discovered something that made her sit up straight. "Diana, I need to call you back," she said, interrupting the lawyer's explanation of precedent cases. "I just found something interesting." After ending the call, Jasmine dug deeper, following a complex trail of investment vehicles and pension fund allocations. What she discovered was extraordinary. TechFusion's employee pension fund, managed by a third-party investment firm, was one of National Airways' largest institutional investors. Through various financial structures, her company effectively controlled $4.9 billion in funding that the airline relied upon. National Airways had just discriminated against the CEO of one of their biggest investors. As this realization settled, Jasmine's phone rang again. It was Terrence. "I've been making calls," he said without preamble. "This isn't isolated. I found 5 other black executives who've had similar experiences with National Airways in the past year alone. None as extreme as yours, but the pattern is clear." Jasmine nodded to herself. "Book me a room at the Four Seasons. I'm not flying back tonight." Then set up an emergency meeting with our executive team for tomorrow morning virtual for those who can't make it in person. And Terrence. "Yes. Tell Marcus to bring all the information he has about our pension fund investments. Everything." After hanging up, Jasmine stared out at the airport tarmac where planes continued taking off and landing in the afternoon sun. For the first time since the incident, a small smile curved her lips. Have you ever faced discrimination and wished you had the power to make real change? Comment number 1 if you've experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling. Comment number 2 if you believe corporations need to be held accountable for the actions of their employees. Hit that like button if you're rooting for Jasmine to get justice, and subscribe to hear more stories about fighting back against discrimination. What would you do if you discovered you had unexpected leverage over someone who wronged you? Let's see how Jasmine uses her newfound power in the next part of this incredible story. The next morning, in a spacious meeting room at the Four Seasons Atlanta, Jasmine stood before a wall-mounted display showing the faces of her executive team, some present in person, others connected virtually from across the Four Seasons, her country. The energy in the room was electric, a mixture of outrage on her behalf and anticipation of her next move. Thank you all for adjusting your schedules, Jasmine began, her voice steady and purposeful. Yesterday, I experienced something that, unfortunately, many of us have faced in different forms throughout our careers. She recounted the incident in clinical detail, her emotion contained but palpable beneath the surface. As she spoke, she noticed her Chief Marketing Officer, Alicia Patterson, shaking her head in disgust, while her Chief Technology Officer, Raymond Washington, sat with his arms crossed, jaw clenched in barely controlled anger. This isn't just about me, Jasmine continued. This is about a pattern of behavior that continues because companies like National Airways face no real consequences. Today we're going to change that equation. She nodded to Marcus Jenkins, her Chief Financial Officer, a brilliant financial strategist who had helped structure Tech Fusion's rapid growth over the past decade. Marcus, please share what you found. Marcus stood straightening his glasses. As Jasmine requested, I've compiled a complete breakdown of our investment connections to National Airways. Our employee pension fund, managed through Granite Investment Partners, controls approximately $4.9 billion in National Airways stock and bonds through various vehicles. This makes us effectively their third largest investor. A murmur ran through the room as the implications became clear. Additionally, Marcus continued our corporate travel account with them, totaled $3.2 million last year alone. We're also midway through negotiations to provide their IT infrastructure upgrade, a contract worth potentially $85 million over 5 years. Jasmine took control of the presentation again. So the question before us is, how do we respond in a way that creates meaningful, lasting change, not just an apology and empty promises? For the next hour, the room buzzed with strategic discussions. Alicia suggested an immediate social media campaign highlighting the incident. Raymond proposed blacklisting National Airways from all corporate travel indefinitely. The General Counsel, Diana Foster, outlined potential legal actions, ranging from discrimination lawsuits to shareholder activism. All viable options, Jasmine acknowledged. But I want to think bigger. National Airways needs more than a PR black eye or a slap on the wrist. They need systemic transformation. She turned to her whiteboard and wrote in bold letters, legal, financial, public, internal. We need a multi-pronged approach that addresses each of these areas, she explained. Diana will prepare legal action, but hold before filing. Marcus will develop financial leverage strategies using our investment position. Raymond, I want you to analyze their internal systems for diversity tracking and accountability, what they have versus what they should have. As the team began to separate into working groups, Jasmine's phone rang. It was Terrence. I've made contact with those other executives I mentioned, he reported. They're willing to share their experiences and join forces if needed. One of them, Dr. Malcolm Robinson, is actually on the board of the National Urban League. Perfect, Jasmine replied. Set up a confidential call with all of them for this evening. By late afternoon, the strategy had taken shape. The legal team had drafted documents outlining clear violations of federal anti-discrimination laws. The financial team had prepared a detailed analysis of how their investment leverage could be applied. The marketing team had crafted messaging that would position any action not as revenge, but as corporate responsibility. As the meeting was concluding, Jasmine addressed her team one final time. What happened yesterday was about more than one flight attendant's bias or one security officer's power trip. It was about a culture that enabled them managers who trained them and executives who created policies that allowed discrimination to flourish. We're not just seeking an apology, we're forcing systematic change. That evening, Jasmine connected with the other Black executives Terrence had found. Each shared similar stories, denied upgrades, despite status questioned about their first-class tickets, subjected to random security checks that seemed anything but random. Dr. Malcolm Robinson, CEO of a major hospital system, spoke last. Individual complaints get buried. Lawsuits get settled with NDAs. Nothing changes. But together with your financial leverage, Jasmine, we might actually create real change in the industry. After the call, Jasmine sat alone in her hotel suite, reviewing the day's work. On her laptop screen was the final piece of the puzzle, the contact information for William Prescott, CEO of National Airways. Tomorrow, she would make the call that would set everything in motion. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of reflection, remembering her grandmother's words when she'd faced discrimination as a child. Don't just get angry, get strategic. Your success will be the sweetest revenge. With that thought, she closed her laptop and prepared for the battle ahead. At National Airways headquarters in Dallas, CEO William Prescott leaned back in his leather chair, half listening, as his executive team discussed the incident from the previous day. The morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the airport, where dozens of planes bearing the company's logo took off and landed in a carefully choreographed dance. The situation was handled according to protocol, insisted Spencer Morgan, head of security operations, a former military man with a rigid demeanor. The passenger was uncooperative and creating a disturbance. Did anyone actually verify who she was? Asked Melissa Chen, the recently appointed Chief Diversity Officer, a position created mainly for appearances after last year's discrimination lawsuit. Spencer waved his hand dismissively. Anyone can claim to be a CEO. Our officers are trained to maintain order, not check LinkedIn profiles. William finally spoke his tone, making it clear he considered this a minor issue. What's the damage control look like, Sarah? Sarah Thompson, the airline's PR director for the past 15 years, consulted her tablet. Standard procedure. We've issued the automatic apology email with bonus miles. If she escalates through customer service, we can offer a voucher for a future flight. Nothing about this has hit social media yet, so I think we're in the clear. Good. William nodded. Last thing we need is another viral video. Remember that doctor we had dragged off in Chicago stock dropped 15% in 2 days? Actually, Melissa interjected, I've reviewed the preliminary report and I'm concerned. The passenger was in her assigned seat, had proper documentation, and according to initial statements, the disturbance was initiated by another passenger. William's expression hardened. We're not here to debate every removal. Our security team made a call, and we back our people. End of discussion. As the meeting continued, the executive team reviewed security footage from the incident. The black and white video showed the confrontation from multiple angles, though conveniently the audio was missing. See, she's clearly arguing with the officer, Spencer pointed out as the footage showed Jasmine speaking to Bennett. She's sitting calmly in her seat, Melissa countered, and it appears the officer grabbed her first, not the other way around. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. We might want to consider a more substantive response than just miles. If this does get out, it won't, William interrupted. How many of these incidents happen every month? Dozens. They all go the same way. Customer complains. We offer compensation. They take it or leave it. Life goes on. He closed the folder containing the incident report. Offer her a first-class round-trip voucher if she formally complains. That should be sufficient. After the meeting dispersed, Jessica Martinez, a mid-level HR manager who had been taking notes during the discussion, remained troubled. For 3 years, she had been tracking patterns of complaints regarding discriminatory treatment, creating spreadsheets and documentation that painted a disturbing picture. Complaints from passengers of color were handled differently than those from white passengers, taking longer to resolve, receiving less compensation, and facing more scrutiny about their veracity. Jessica had raised these concerns through proper channels multiple times, only to have them buried or dismissed as statistically insignificant. Now, watching the executive team's cavalier response to what appeared to be a clear-cut case of discrimination, something inside her snapped. Back at her desk, she researched Jasmine Reynolds and Tech Fusion Enterprises, confirming what Melissa had suspected: this was indeed a major CEO, not someone making false claims. The injustice of the situation, combined with dozens of similar cases she had documented, compelled her to take an unprecedented step. That afternoon, Jessica used an encrypted email service to send a message to the contact information listed on Tech Fusion's website. Miss Reynolds, you don't know me, but I work in HR at National Airways. What happened to you is part of a pattern I've been documenting for years. I have evidence that might help you. This isn't right, and I can't stay silent anymore. She attached several anonymized spreadsheets showing complaint patterns broken down by race, along with internal emails discussing how to minimize payouts to certain types of customers. After clicking send, Jessica felt both terror and relief. Whatever happened next, she had finally acted according to her conscience. Meanwhile, in another part of the building, National Airways Chief Financial Officer Patrick Reynolds, no relation to Jasmine, was reviewing unusual activity in their investor relations dashboard. Several large institutional investors had made inquiries about the company's diversity policies and incident response protocols within the past 24 hours. Additionally, there had been some movement in their stock, nothing dramatic, but unusual patterns that suggested coordinated activity. Get me a breakdown of who's behind these inquiries, he instructed his assistant, and set up a call with Granite Investment Partners. They're suddenly asking a lot of questions. By late afternoon, William Prescott was no longer dismissing the incident so casually. Patrick had briefed him on the unusual investor activity, and the legal department had reported receiving an inquiry from a prominent civil rights attorney about their security protocols and training procedures. It could be coincidence, Sarah suggested without much conviction. Or it could be that we remove someone with actual influence, Patrick countered. The timing is suspicious. William's assistant interrupted with a message. Sir, Tech Fusion Enterprises is on line 1. Their CEO, Jasmine Reynolds, is asking to speak with you directly. The room fell silent as the executives exchanged glances. Put her through, William said, reaching for the speakerphone button. His casual dismissal from earlier, now replaced with growing concern. While National Airways executives were just beginning to grasp the potential ramifications of their actions, Jasmine was methodically preparing for what would become the most significant confrontation of her career. In her temporary command center at the Four Seasons, she had assembled an elite team. Diana Foster was coordinating with 3 external law firms specializing in discrimination cases. Marcus Jenkins was on continuous calls with financial analysts, mapping out the complex web of investments that connected Tech Fusion to National Airways. Alicia Patterson had prepared media packages ready to deploy on a moment's notice, with contacts at major networks already on alert. Their CEO seemed surprised to hear from me, Jasmine told her team after the brief call with William Prescott. He's agreed to a meeting tomorrow morning. They're sending a private jet. A private jet? Raymond raised an eyebrow. They're already trying to impress you. Or isolate me, Jasmine countered. Which is why none of us will be flying on their aircraft. Book commercial flights for the core team, different airlines, different times. The rest will join virtually. The team operated with military precision. By evening, they had compiled a devastating dossier on National Airways' internal documents from Jessica Martinez, showing a pattern of discrimination. Testimony from 17 former employees describing a toxic culture. Statistics revealing disparate treatment of minority passengers, and a comprehensive breakdown of the company's vulnerabilities, financial, legal, and reputational. In her hotel suite that night, Jasmine stood before a full-length mirror, carefully selecting her armor for the coming battle. She chose a custom Armani suit in deep burgundy, powerful yet understated. Her natural hair would be worn in an elegant updo, her accessories minimal but expensive. Every detail was calculated to project the authority that had been so casually dismissed on that plane. Your car's confirmed for 7 a.m. Terrence reported, bringing her a final revised strategy document. The team will arrive at various times throughout the morning as planned. And the presentation, Jasmine asked, loaded on multiple devices, backed up to our secure server, and printed in hard copy just in case. Jasmine nodded, reviewing the material one last time. The presentation was a masterpiece of corporate strategy, beginning with irrefutable evidence of discrimination, followed by a devastating analysis of the financial and legal consequences National Airways would face, and concluding with a comprehensive reform package that would transform the company's culture from the inside out. "What about Jessica Martinez?" Jasmine asked. "Is she protected?" Diana nodded. "We've arranged top-tier whistleblower protection legal counsel for her, paid anonymously through our foundation. She won't lose everything for doing the right thing." Throughout the evening, Jasmine received calls of support from the network of Black executives she had contacted. Many had experienced similar treatment from various companies over the years, but had never possessed the leverage to force meaningful change. "You're fighting for all of us," Dr. Malcolm Robinson told her. "This isn't just about one incident on one flight. It's about changing the calculation these companies make when they allow discrimination to flourish." As midnight approached, Jasmine received an unexpected call from her grandmother, Eloise, now 92 years old, and still sharp as ever. "I saw that look in your eye during our video call earlier," Eloise said. "Same look you had when you told me you were starting your own company instead of taking that safe job. You're about to do something big." Jasmine smiled, feeling a momentary release of tension. They picked the wrong Black woman to mess with Grandma. Eloise responded with a chuckle. "They always do. Just remember what I taught you. In these rooms full of powerful men, your greatest weapon isn't anger, it's clarity. Be so clear and so right that they have nowhere to hide." After the call, Jasmine practiced her presentation one final time. She wouldn't be using slides or notes tomorrow. Every figure, every fact, every legal precedent would be delivered from memory, maintaining unbroken eye contact with the executives who had allowed this culture of discrimination to flourish under their watch. As she finally prepared for bed, her phone pinged with an encrypted message from Jessica Martinez. "They're scrambling. Emergency executive meeting lasted until 11 p.m. They've asked legal to prepare multiple scenarios for tomorrow. Good luck." Jasmine smiled. National Airways was preparing for a negotiation, perhaps even expecting a confrontation. What they didn't realize was that she wasn't coming to negotiate, she was coming to transform. Morning came quickly. As Jasmine's car navigated through Atlanta's early traffic toward National Airways regional headquarters, she watched the city wake up around her. Service workers, catching buses, executives in luxury cars, families starting their day, each person carrying their own experiences of how America treated them based on the color of their skin. Today wouldn't fix everything. One company changing its ways wouldn't erase centuries of discrimination. But it would be a start, a clear message that in the corporate world, At least there could be real consequences for treating people differently based on race. As the imposing glass tower of National Airways Atlanta Operations Center came into view, Jasmine took a deep breath, channeling the strength of every person who had faced discrimination without the power to fight back. "We're here, Miss Reynolds," her driver announced. "Thank you," she replied, gathering her briefcase. As she stepped out of the car, heads turned among the employees entering the building. A few whispers, some pointed fingers, word had clearly spread about who was visiting today. Jasmine walked through the revolving doors with perfect posture, her expression calm but determined. At the security desk, the guard checked her ID with unusual thoroughness. "Miss Reynolds for the 9 a.m. with Mr. Prescott," she stated simply. "Yes, ma'am," the guard replied, visibly nervous. "They're, expecting you on the executive floor, 40th floor. The express elevator is to your right." As Jasmine waited for the elevator, she noticed her reflection in the polished doors. A powerful black woman standing tall in a space built by and for people who had never expected someone like her to wield real power. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. As she stepped inside and the doors closed, Jasmine allowed herself one final moment of private emotion, a small smile of grim determination before her face returned to the composed mask of corporate warfare. The elevator ascended rapidly, each floor bringing her closer to a confrontation that would shake National Airways to its core. By the time it reached the 40th floor, Jasmine Reynolds was ready, not just to seek justice for herself, but to create lasting change in an industry that had operated with impunity for far too long. The doors slid open to reveal a reception area where several anxious-looking executives awaited her arrival. Their expressions told her everything she needed to know. They were finally beginning to understand the gravity of their situation. The National Airways boardroom projected power and prestige. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Atlanta's skyline and the airport beyond, where the company's planes took off and landed in an endless cycle of profit. The massive mahogany table gleamed under recessed lighting, surrounded by 20 high-backed leather chairs currently occupied by the airline's top executives. They had arranged themselves strategically, William Prescott at the head of the table, flanked by his CFO Patrick Reynolds and legal counsel Gregory Thompson. Security head Spencer Morgan sat slightly apart, his posture defensive. Melissa Chen, the diversity officer, had been positioned near the middle of the table, clearly an afterthought in their strategy. When Jasmine entered, the conversation stopped abruptly. Several executives did double takes, recognition dawning as they connected her face to the security footage they'd reviewed. William stood, offering a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Reynolds, thank you for coming. We're eager to resolve this unfortunate situation." Jasmine didn't return the smile. Her team filed in behind her, Diana, Marcus, and Alicia, taking positions along the wall, while Terrence set up a secure laptop connection for the virtual participants. "Before we begin," William continued, "I want to personally apologize for any inconvenience you experienced on our flight. We pride ourselves on customer service, and clearly we fell short in this instance." "Inconvenience," Jasmine repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "Is that what you call having security drag a paying customer off a flight for being black in first class?" William's smile faltered. "Now, Miss Reynolds, I don't think that characterization is quite—" "My name," she interrupted, "is Jasmine Reynolds. I'm the founder and CEO of Tech Fusion Enterprises, a $17 billion company that employs over 5,000 people. And 3 days ago, your employees humiliated me in front of hundreds of witnesses because they couldn't believe a black woman belonged in first class." She placed her briefcase on the table and withdrew a single document, sliding it across to William. "What's this?" he asked, not touching it. "The beginning of your education," Jasmine replied. "It's a list of 17 discriminatory incidents involving black passengers on National Airways flights in the past year alone. 5 involved executives at director level or above. 1 was a federal judge. 2 were celebrities traveling incognito. All were treated like criminals for the crime of flying while black. William glanced at the document, then passed it to his legal counsel. Miss Reynolds, we take these allegations very seriously, but isolated incidents don't constitute. They aren't isolated, Jasmine cut in. They're systemic, and I have the data to prove it. She nodded to Terrence, who activated the room's display screen. A detailed statistical analysis appeared showing complaint rates, resolution times, and compensation amounts broken down by passenger race. The disparities were stark and undeniable. Where did you get this information? Gregory Thompson demanded, leaning forward. That's not relevant, Jasmine replied coolly. What's relevant is that it's accurate, and it shows a clear pattern of discrimination that would be compelling to both courts and regulatory agencies. She turned to address the whole room. But we're not here to debate whether discrimination exists at National Airways. We're here because it does exist. It happened to me, and now you're going to fix it. Patrick Reynolds, the CFO, cleared his throat. Miss Reynolds, while we appreciate your concern, National Airways is a publicly traded company with responsibilities to our shareholders. Any policy changes need to be evaluated through proper channels, and I'm intimately familiar with your shareholder structure, Jasmine, interrupted, nodding to Marcus, who distributed a financial analysis to everyone at the table. Tech Fusion's pension fund, managed through Granite Investment Partners, controls $4.9 billion of National Airways funding through various investment vehicles. That makes us your third largest institutional investor. The room fell silent as the executives flipped through the analysis expressions, morphing from dismissive to concerned. Additionally, Jasmine continued, our pending IT infrastructure contract worth $85 million is now on hold, and our annual corporate travel account of $3.2 million will be directed elsewhere unless significant changes occur. William's face had lost its practiced corporate calm. Are you threatening us, Miss Reynolds? I'm informing you of business decisions being made based on your company's demonstrated values, Jasmine replied evenly. Values that were made abundantly clear when your employees felt empowered to humiliate a black woman executive without fear of consequences. She walked slowly around the table, making eye contact with each executive. Here's what's going to happen. First, a public apology naming the specific employees involved and acknowledging the discriminatory nature of the incident. Second, the termination of those employees, not reassignment, not retraining, termination. Third, implementation of a comprehensive anti-bias program with measurable outcomes tied to executive compensation. William started to object, but Jasmine raised her hand, silencing him. I'm not finished. Fourth, the establishment of a $50 million fund to compensate victims of discrimination on your airline and support organizations fighting for transportation equity. Fifth, quarterly diversity audits conducted by an independent third party with results published publicly. And sixth, the addition of 2 board seats specifically designated for diversity advocates with binding input on policy decisions. She returned to her original position, standing tall at the opposite end of the table from William. You have 24 hours to agree to these terms. After that, I will simultaneously file a discrimination lawsuit with 17 co-plaintiffs, direct our pension fund to divest all holdings in National Airways. Launch a national media campaign detailing your discriminatory practices, and release internal documents showing your executives were aware of these issues and chose to ignore them. Gregory Thompson, the legal counsel, leaned toward William. We should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, William countered, his face flushed with anger. Miss Reynolds, while we regret your experience, these demands are completely unreasonable. National Airways cannot be strong-armed by one disgruntled passenger, regardless of their financial connections. Jasmine smiled for the first time since entering the room, a small, knowing smile that sent a visible chill through the executives. I expected you might say that, she replied, nodding again to Terrence, who displayed a new document on the screen. An email chain between William and Spencer, discussing how to minimize payouts to the diversity complaints and avoid making any admissions that could be used against us. William's face drained of color.
Where did you get that? Those are private communications.
A conscience is a powerful thing, Mr. Prescott. It seems not everyone in your organization is comfortable with institutionalized racism. Jessica Martinez, sitting in a back corner taking notes, kept her expression neutral, but her hands trembled slightly. 24 hours, Jasmine repeated, gathering her materials. My team will provide the detailed requirements to your legal department this afternoon. I suggest you use your time wisely. As she turned to leave, William found his voice again. This is extortion. Jasmine paused at the door, turning back to face the table of executives. No, Mr. Prescott. This is accountability. For too long, companies like yours have calculated that discrimination costs less than equity. I'm simply changing the math. With that, she walked out, her team following behind, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. 1 year later, Jasmine Reynolds stood in front of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., the flashbulbs of cameras illuminating her confident smile. Behind her on stage sat an unlikely alliance: William Prescott of National Airways, Dr. Malcolm Robinson of the National Urban League, Jessica Martinez, now heading National Airways Office of Inclusion, and representatives from 5 other major airlines. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the Airline Equity Accord. Jasmine began, her voice carrying through the packed room. What began as a personal experience of discrimination has transformed into an industry-wide commitment to equitable treatment for all passengers. The journey to this moment had begun with the explosive news coverage following National Airways' public apology. The story had dominated headlines for weeks. Black CEO pulls $4.9 investment after discrimination. National Airways admits systemic bias. Corporate America's reckoning with racism. After Jasmine's ultimatum, the National Airways Board had convened an emergency meeting that lasted through the night. By morning, they had accepted all 6 of her demands, recognizing that the alternative would likely lead to the company's collapse. The public apology had been unprecedented in its directness. William Prescott, looking uncomfortable but resigned, had stated plainly, "National Airways acknowledges that Ms. Reynolds was subjected to discriminatory treatment based on racial bias. We take full responsibility for the actions of our employees and the culture that enabled such behavior." Megan Walsh, Richard Bennett, and several supervisors had been terminated within 48 hours. The news had sent shockwaves through the industry. For the first time, there were real public consequences for discrimination that companies could not hide behind confidential settlements. The $50 million equity fund had been established, with an independent board already providing compensation to hundreds of passengers who had experienced similar treatment, and supporting grassroots organizations focused on transportation equity. But the most significant change had come in the form of the Airline Equity Accord, a voluntary industry standard initiated by National Airways and now adopted by 78% of domestic carriers. The Accord established common training protocols, reporting mechanisms, and transparency requirements designed to root out discriminatory practices. The data speaks for itself, Jasmine continued in her address, gesturing to the screen behind her. Discriminatory incidents have declined by 63% across participating airlines. Complaint resolution times have equalized across demographic groups. Employee satisfaction scores have increased, particularly among staff of color. And perhaps most telling for the skeptics, company performance has improved, with National Airways stock up 17% since implementation. She acknowledged Jessica Martinez with a nod. None of this would have been possible without brave individuals willing to speak truth to power, often at great personal risk. Jessica, now a celebrated whistleblower rather than a fearful HR manager, smiled back. Her decision to come forward had inspired others throughout the industry to expose discriminatory practices, creating a wave of accountability that extended far beyond one airline. Corporate America is watching, Jasmine continued. In the past year, similar equity accords have been established in the hotel industry, rental car companies, and retail chains. The message is clear. Discrimination is no longer a viable business model. Following the press conference at a private reception for key stakeholders, William approached Jasmine with a glass of champagne. "I never thought I'd say this," he admitted, "but you were right. Not just morally, which I've come to understand, but business-wise. Our customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high. It turns out, treating people with dignity is good for the bottom line," Jasmine replied with a knowing smile. Who would have thought? Later that evening, Jasmine boarded a National Airways flight back to Atlanta, her first time flying the airline since the incident. The difference was palpable. The crew, now noticeably diverse, moved through the cabin with a new awareness. Every passenger received the same level of attention and respect, regardless of appearance. As she settled into her first-class seat, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome aboard National Airways Flight 1619 to Atlanta. We're committed to ensuring every passenger has a safe, comfortable, and equitable journey." The flight attendant approaching her seat was a young black woman wearing a name tag that read Keisha. She smiled warmly. "Miss Reynolds, it's an honor to have you on board. Can I get you anything before takeoff?" "Just water with lemon, please," Jasmine replied, returning the smile. "Coming right up," Keisha assured her before adding in a lower voice. "And thank you. My mother was removed from a flight 10 years ago for being in the wrong seat. What you did, it changed things for all of us." As the plane taxied for takeoff, Jasmine opened her laptop to review TechFusion's latest project, an AI tool designed to detect patterns of bias in corporate communications and customer service interactions. The technology, developed in partnership with Dr. Malcolm Robinson's research team, was already being implemented in call centers and customer service operations across multiple industries. Looking out the window at the setting sun, Jasmine reflected on the chain of events that had brought her here. One humiliating incident had become a catalyst for transformation, not through social media outrage or fleeting public attention, but through strategic use of economic power and accountability. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Jasmine thought about her grandmother's words, "Your greatest weapon isn't anger, it's clarity." That clarity had changed not just one company, but an entire industry. And it was only the beginning. Jasmine Reynolds' journey teaches us that true change requires more than just moral outrage. It demands strategic action backed by leverage. When facing discrimination, the most powerful response isn't simply walking away or venting on social media, but methodically using available resources to transform broken systems. Her story demonstrates that individual incidents of racism aren't isolated. They're symptoms of institutional failures that flourish when consequences are minimal. By changing the financial equation, Jasmine forced an entire industry to recognize that discrimination is not just morally wrong, but economically unsustainable. The story also highlights the crucial role of allies and whistleblowers, like Jessica Martinez, who risked their careers to expose injustice. It reminds us that accountability can come from unexpected places. Sometimes, the very structures that enable discrimination can be repurposed to dismantle it. Most importantly, Jasmine's approach shows that lasting change happens not through quick fixes or temporary outrage, but through systemic reform with measurable outcomes and ongoing vigilance. Have you ever witnessed discrimination that went unchallenged because the person targeted lacked power or resources? What industries do you think still need this kind of accountability revolution? Share your experiences in the comments. You believe in the power of strategic action against discrimination? Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes your greatest power isn't just walking away from injustice, but coming back with the strategy to transform it. May we all find both the clarity and courage to create the change our world desperately needs.